These are 7 jobs that thousands of women clocked into every morning in 1928, and not one survives today. Some paid better than the work their own fathers did. One of them was quietly killing the women who took it. Every single one felt permanent to the people doing it, the same way your job probably feels permanent to you right now. Then a machine, a law, or a simple change in taste erased it, and the paychecks stopped for good. This is what those women actually did, what it put in their purse, and what made each trade disappear. Some of these jobs died in a single generation. A few hung on just long enough for their granddaughters to hear about them at the kitchen table before they were gone completely. And we start with the radium dial painter, because no other job on this list cost its workers more. Number 7. The radium dial painter. In studios across New Jersey and Illinois, young women sat in long rows painting glowing numbers onto watch faces and military instrument dials. The paint was called undark, mixed with radium, and it shimmered in the dark like something out of a fairy tale. To keep a fine point on their brushes, the women were taught to shape the bristles with their lips. Lip, dip, paint. Hour after hour, all day long, they swallowed tiny amounts of one of the most dangerous substances ever placed in human hands. Many of them thought the glow was wonderful. Girls would paint their fingernails with the leftover radium to surprise their sweethearts in the dark, or dab a little on their teeth for a glowing smile, having no idea what it was doing inside them. The pay was the whole draw. Dial painting was among the best money a working-class girl could earn without a diploma. Better than a shop counter, better than a laundry. And the girls felt lucky to be chosen for it. Then their teeth began to loosen. Their jaws crumbled. Doctors called it radium jaw, and the companies denied responsibility. Grace Fryer, one of the dial painters, spent 2 years searching for a lawyer willing to take on U.S. Radium Corporation before she finally found one. In 1928, the Radium Girls settled a landmark case against their employer, forcing the country to look at what the work had done. The trade did not survive that reckoning. Safety rules, public horror, and new methods ended the hand-painting of radium dials, and the job vanished along with the women it had poisoned. Some of them kept getting sicker for years after the last dial was ever painted. Next, number 6. The switchboard operator. Before a telephone call could happen, a human being had to make it happen. In every town, rooms full of young women sat at towering switchboards, listening for a small light, answering with a bright hello, and physically plugging a cord into a socket to join one caller to another. They were called the Hello Girls, and the Bell Telephone Company wanted them by the hundreds of thousands. The very first woman to take that chair was Emma Nutt, who picked up a cord in Boston in 1878 and set the template for every operator who followed her. A calm, pleasant female voice was considered good for business, and the wages paid to women were lower than what men expected for the same hours. The rules were strict to the point of cruelty. Operators sat straight, spoke from a script, and were timed on every single connection they made. Even so, it was steady, clean, respectable work, at a time when very little of that was open to women, and it made the telephone company one of the largest employers of young women in the country. Even in 1928, the dial telephone was already spreading, letting people connect their own calls without asking a soul. The machine did in 1 second what a woman had done by hand, and it never needed a lunch break or a night's sleep. Over the following decades, the switchboards emptied out, and the bright hello that had answered millions of calls simply went silent. Next, number 5, the taxi dancer. In the dance halls of the 1920s, a man could buy a ticket for about 10 cents in exchange for a single dance. When the music stopped, so did his time, unless he bought another ticket. These women were taxi dancers, hired by the hall to dance with paying strangers all night long, keeping a share of every ticket they collected. The halls filled up with lonely men far from home, new arrivals to the city, and laborers with no easy way to meet a partner. And for a few coins they could hold someone for 3 minutes at a time. A quick, popular dancer could gather a thick roll of tickets in one evening, and the best earnings went to the women who could keep a lonely customer buying just one more song. It was hard on the feet, and even harder on the reputation, because society looked down on women paid to be held by strangers. The work even had its own famous song about the loneliness of dancing for dimes. The 1930 ballad, 10 Cents a Dance, captured the life so precisely that the phrase became shorthand for the whole trade. A sociologist at the University of Chicago named Paul Cressy spent years studying these halls and documented the dancers' lives in a 1932 book that is still the definitive record of the profession. As social attitudes shifted and the old dance halls closed their doors, the taxi dancer disappeared, and the whole idea of buying a dance one ticket at a time went out of the world with her. Next, number 4, the elevator operator. An elevator in 1928 was not something you rode alone. Someone had to stand inside, work the lever, and stop the car exactly level with each floor by feel, a skill that took real practice to master. In department stores and hotels, operators were often young women in crisp uniforms, announcing each floor as the doors slid open. It was a public-facing job that placed a working woman in front of wealthy shoppers all day, expected to stay polite and patient, no matter how the hours dragged. Automatic elevators already existed, but the public did not trust a moving box with nobody at the controls, so the operators stayed employed. That trust arrived slowly. Push buttons, automatic doors, and a major operator strike pushed building owners toward machines that ran themselves. One by one, the uniformed women stepped out of the cars for the last time, and the elevator finally learned to run without them. Today, most people ride one every day without once thinking that it used to come with a person and a paycheck attached. Next, number 3, the comptometer operator. Long before anyone owned a computer, businesses ran on a machine called the comptometer, a dense grid of keys invented by Dor Felt in 1887 that could add, subtract, multiply, and divide far faster than any person with a pencil. Operating one well was a genuine skill, and entire schools trained women to fly across those keys without looking down. By the 1920s, more than 100 of these schools were turning out around 20,000 graduates a year. A trained comptometer operator handled payroll, invoices, and ledgers for banks, factories, and government offices, and a fast, accurate one was valued and paid accordingly. For a great many women, it was a real path into steady office work at a time when those doors were mostly closed. A good operator worked fast and made no mistakes, trusted with the numbers a whole business depended on. The electronic calculator, and then the computer, ended every bit of it. A silent chip could do the same sums instantly and never made a single slip, so the clatter of the comptometer room fell quiet, and an entire profession of women who calculated for a living faded out of the workforce for good. Next, number 2, the milliner. In 1928, almost no respectable woman left the house without a hat, and that custom supported an army of milliners. These women designed, blocked, and trimmed hats by hand, working ribbon, felt, straw, and feathers into whatever shape the season demanded. A skilled milliner had both an eye and a craft, and in a good shop she could earn a solid living turning out one careful piece after another. Hats were not an accessory then, they were a requirement, and that requirement kept thousands of women employed at the trimming bench in every city and town. Two things slowly unraveled the trade. Fashion turned away from the formal hat, until going bareheaded became ordinary rather than scandalous, and the hats people did still buy were more and more often stamped out cheaply in factories. The handmade hat became a luxury for a shrinking few, and the everyday milliner, once a fixture on every main street, very nearly disappeared. The skill did not vanish because it was bad. It vanished because the world stopped asking for it. Next, number 1, the knocker-upper. Before a cheap alarm clock sat on every nightstand, how did the early shift wake up on time? In the industrial towns of Britain, they hired a knocker-upper. For a few pennies a week, this person walked dark streets before dawn and woke clients by rapping on bedroom windows. Sometimes with a long pole, sometimes by firing dried peas at the glass through a shooter. The job naturally went to people who were awake at that hour anyway, and among them were women who took on a whole round of houses and guarded that round like a business, because a client who overslept and lost a day's wages would not stay a client for long. It sounds like a tall tale, but it was a genuine paycheck built entirely on one fact: that ordinary people could not reliably wake themselves. The affordable alarm clock removed that fact overnight. When a small mechanical clock could do the same job for the price of one wake-up, the knocker-uppers round was finished, and one of the strangest honest livings a woman ever earned quietly came to an end. 7 jobs, 7 paychecks, every one of them gone. Look closely, and the same pattern runs straight through all of them. A machine that did the task cheaper, a law that finally admitted the harm, or a shift in what people wanted took the work away, and the women who had built a whole life around it were left to start over. That is worth sitting with for a moment. Because the women who painted those dials, plugged those cords, and danced for dimes were certain their work would always be needed. It felt as solid as the ground under their feet. The lesson they left behind is not simply that jobs disappear. It is that they disappear far faster than the people doing them ever expect. The paycheck that feels safest today can be the first one a new machine decides it no longer needs. So which of these would you have taken, back when it still looked like a steady future? Tell me in the comments, and subscribe if you want me to keep digging up the paychecks that history tried to leave behind.